Most businesses identify 6 key digital technologies: artificial intelligence, distributed ledgers and blockchain, the Internet of Things, autonomous machines, virtual and augmented reality, and 5G communication as critical to their relevance and growth over the coming 10 years. These new disruptive technologies present significant opportunity for businesses in every industry. The first businesses to understand automation and these transformative technologies will be the ones to reap the greatest rewards in the marketplace. Today, my guest, Steve Brown, and I discuss topics such as the inspiration behind his book, why these topics are important to leaders, how these changes will affect organizations, how leaders can best prepare for the upcoming changes in technology, amongst many other topics. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 120, the Innovation Ultimatum with Steve Brown. Welcome one, welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy. It's so great to have you here yet again. And if it's not yet again, that means it's your first time. And welcome to the podcast, revolving around the 3 domains of leadership: leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. Why? So that you can be the best leader you can be, so that you can build relationships amongst your team members, and you can push your organization's output, whatever that is, to the highest it's ever been. So thanks, folks. Thanks for coming out, joining me. It's so great to have you. And it's so great to have a world-class guest yet again on the show. Steve Brown. This was an epic interview. So good that I threw it in our Facebook group, Leadership Skills for Managers Who Want to Be Leaders and Not Bosses. And if you're not a part of that group, well, you missed out, because you would have had this interview probably over a month ago. It's been that long since I interviewed Steve. Nonetheless, here it is for you today, and it's great. So who's Steve? He's a futurist, he's an author, he's a strategist, he's an advisor with over 30 years of experience in the high-tech businesses. Before starting his own business, he was Intel chief evangelist and worked in Intel Labs as a futurist. So he was basically thinking 5, 10, 15 years in the future. So after leaving Intel in 2016, he started his own company. And here we have his book today with the interview that you're about to listen to. Let me tell you, folks, it was great. Steve's a fantastic guest. Lots of amazing information in there. It behooves you to, 1, obviously listen to the podcast, but 2, you probably should go ahead and grab a book because it is fantastic. Nonetheless, I'm going to digress now. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview about the Innovation Ultimatum with Steve Brown. Steve, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Scott.
So today we're talking about innovation and technologies that are going to help leaders out there ensure that their organizations, whether they're businesses or nonprofits or whatever that they're leading, are successful in the future. And that, for the way I run Moving Forward Leadership, runs into the whole lead your organization domain of leadership. But before we really dive into that aspect, let's talk a bit about you, the person Steve Brown. Who are you? A bit about your background, how you got to where you are today, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I call myself a futurist. There are lots of people out there who use that title. Some of them are more snake oil salespeople. Others have a background and discipline in strategic planning, and I hope that I am the latter. I spent almost 30 years of my career working at Intel, the big semiconductor company, in one role or another. So I started as an engineer. I have a couple of degrees in microelectronics, so I know how to design chips and write software and that sort of thing, although honestly, I probably couldn't do that to save my life now, but there was a time when I knew. But I spent most of my time in the business at Intel. So in management, leadership roles, in marketing, in business development, in engineering, in manufacturing. So, really use my career to broaden my experience. My goal when I was at Intel was never to rise to the top. It was to do useful and interesting work, but also to round myself out. So I've spent a lot of time in strategic planning, forward-looking roles. That was always just the way my brain worked. And when I was a kid growing up in the UK in the 70s, I was just fascinated with these computery things. And that fascination has remained ever since, because it's very clear that they're incredibly powerful tools to change the world. So about half of my career at Intel was in strategic planning, including working in Intel's labs as one of Intel's 2 futurists. So helping the company to think about what's the world feel like to live in 10 years or so from now. So my brain is trained to think about the world 10 years ahead. The reason for that is that Intel designing a chip took about 7 years from initial design to coming off the production line in millions of units. And so to get out ahead of that, we were always thinking about what are the problems that people will be trying to solve about 10 years from now. So that's what I do now. I left Intel in 2016, decided to become an independent consultant and speaker. So I travel around the world helping companies big and small, everything from charities and nonprofits to literally Fortune 20 companies to think through how is the world going to change and how can they use technology to innovate? How do they drive innovation through their businesses? And that's the reason I wrote my book, The Innovation Ultimatum, was because it became apparent to me that the speed of technological advancement has outstripped leaders' abilities to understand the implications of those technologies. And I wanted to help leaders through that and to understand how they can use technology to build a better future for their employees, for their businesses, their shareholders by implication, but mostly how they can use technology to build a better world for people. And that's what I'm focused on. So that's kind of where I'm coming from in all of this.
You dovetailed quite nicely into my second question to the point where I don't even need to ask it. But that was what's the inspiration behind the book. And you answered that. But for the listener there, his website is The Bald Futurist. So I can confirm the former part of that website is true. I'm looking at him on Zoom, and he is in fact bald. But we'll definitely look at whether or not he does well in looking down the future. A little tongue-in-cheek joke. We got to keep it light here at Moving Forward Leadership because we are still in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, my head looks like a crystal ball, put it that way.
Oh, nice. Well played, sir. So, anyway, let's get back on track. Your book, The Innovation Ultimatum. By the way, I'm holding a copy. Thank you very much.
Oh, great.
So happy to get it. How 6 strategic technologies will reshape every business in the 2020s. So let's dive in there. What are the 6? And why are they the ones that are going to really reshape? And why not some random 7th out there?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Why did they pick those 6? Because there are clearly others out there, but these were the ones that really stuck out to me. As a futurist, I'm always looking for which are the most impactful changes that will shape the future. And these were the 6, and I can explain why each one I think is important, that really I think are going to shape the next decade for businesses. Let me walk you through them. First one, the big one of them all is artificial intelligence. So machine learning, deep learning capability. The reason that technology is important is it solves problems in a new way. So it's not just a different form of computing. It is a way of solving problems that we don't know how to solve ourselves. So that makes it incredibly powerful technology. And we should come back to that and dig into what sorts of problems you can solve with artificial intelligence. But that's number one. So that's the first chapter of the book and the biggest chapter of the book. Second one is sensors and the Internet of Things, allowing the digital world to understand what's happening in the physical world. So the big picture here, and where all of these technologies fit, is they're continuing this story of the digital world and the physical world being ever more intimately connected. So think about building a bridge between the digital world that we know increases in capability exponentially and the physical world that we all live in. And that allows more value to stream across that bridge. So sensors and the Internet of Things, which is the notion of computing getting very small and very cheap, so you can connect objects, wearables, infrastructure, entire businesses and make them connected. So that's number two. The third one is sort of an extension of artificial intelligence, which is creating autonomous machines. Autonomous machines are using AI and sensing capability to enable machines to make their own decisions. That's what makes them autonomous. And what I'm talking about here is robots, drones, autonomous vehicles of all shapes, everything from autonomous cars, of course, self-driving cars, to autonomous trucks, and even autonomous shipping. The fourth one is blockchain technology. This is a whole hour conversation on its own. But this is a way of creating value in new ways, creating distributed organizations, distributed value, the whole notion of token economics to align and incentivize behaviors in new ways. It is a powerful automation technology that I think is only just finding its stride. Blockchain has been, let's say, overhyped. Let's be kind. It's been overhyped for about 10 years.
We're going to come back to that one.
Yeah, it's finally finding its way. And if you look at really fundamental, foundational technologies like HTML, which led to the web, they took a while to get the features they needed to really be useful. And the same is true of blockchain. Fifth technology is new networks, so 5G and satellite constellations. So 5G it's another G, right? So it must be better. 4G to 5G. Of course it's better. And it's going to mean that we can connect things at roughly 10 to 100 times the speed that we could with 4G, which is nice, great. But it's a lot more than that. 5G networks are the first cellular networks that were designed from the ground up with more than phones in mind. So they're designed for connecting any and all devices. So the Internet of Things, the 100 trillion sensors that we think will be deployed by the end of this decade, and to be able to connect infrastructure, smart products, as well as all of our new fancy cell phones. It's going to change the way that businesses operate and enable us to reach customers in new ways with new services. And then you complement that with satellite networks. So 5G is great if you live in a city. If you live in a rural environment, which roughly half the planet does, you're not going to get much in the way of connectivity. That's where these satellite constellations come in. These are constellations of thousands of low Earth orbit satellites that together will blanket the Earth in connectivity, giving us, kind of 4.5G speeds, great latency because it turns out information moves quickly through the vacuum of space compared to fiber optic cables. So that's those together, 5G networks and satellite networks are the fifth technology. Massive, big deal. The final one is the one that's the furthest out, but I think has profound implications for the future of work, which again, we can dig into in a minute. And that is augmented reality. So the ability to essentially hack someone's perception. So instead of having information trapped inside displays, rectangular displays that hang on our walls, sit on our desks, or on our pockets and purses, you can start to blend digital information, objects in our field of view over the top of what we can see. So it's a pair of fancy glasses that will become the new display. This will be the new visual interface. I think this has as much impact on the way that we interact with digital information and services as touch interfaces did in the last decade. So still probably 2 to 3 years before we get anything meaningful that hits the masses. It's kind of in trial stages right now. But once that matures, I think that becomes the new interface and it's going to change the way we all work. So that's your 6 technologies. Long answer to an important question.
No, for sure. But I'm super interested right across the board, and I'll tell you, why personally, but I'll tell the listener why they need to be interested as well, because these things are coming, right? And as leaders, we need to be on top of these technologies. We need to be on top of the changing ways that the world is changing, so that we can keep our organizations at the forefront. You look at organizations, big businesses, Kodak, they lost out. You go and you talk, listen to, Jeffrey Hazlett. He used to be the chief marketing officer, and he talks about the story where they missed out on developing the digital camera. Why? Because they thought themselves as a film company, not as a photography company. And now they don't exist anymore. Look at Sears, gone. Toys R Us, gone. Why? Because they couldn't keep up with the change in ways. Personally, I'm super interested across the board, because I'll tell you, by day, I'm a senior Canadian Army officer, and right now I'm finishing up a master's program in defense studies, and we're talking about pretty much all these technologies right across the board for the forces and the implications that these will have on the future of warfare. So if people think this is just for business, and the listener thinks, it's only for business, I'm in not profit. Well, I'm not really in profit neither, and we're talking about these things. So yes, they're important across the board for sure.
And it's the, I was going to say the addition, but the multiplication of these technologies. It's putting them together to solve problems creatively that will make the biggest breakthroughs. And the reason I wrote the book was because I wanted to equip leaders with the right questions to ask. So as they're building their strategies, they're looking 3 to 5 years out. I'm trying to give them a picture 10 years out so they can backtrack from there and empower them to ask either their IT department, if they're a big enough company to have one, or to challenge and push their suppliers, their technology suppliers, to ask the right questions, and to push suppliers that if they don't have answers to those questions, to move on and get the right new suppliers. So this was an exercise in empowering leaders so that they know what to ask and have the basics of, well, what kind of problems can these technologies solve? Because what I found was, if you're the CEO of, I'll make it up, a manufacturing company, or you're the CMO, chief medical officer at a hospital, or you're the CMO, chief marketing officer of distribution company, you're supposed to be the strategic minds of the organization, and yet a lot of what you do is quite tactical, right? You're having to deal with a customer online stop, or an HR issue where someone's been playing grab ass again and you've got to fire them. I mean, there's all these tactical things. So the time that you have to think strategically is already fairly compressed versus what you would want to have. And layer on top of that, if you are the CEO of a manufacturing company, or you're the chief medical officer of a hospital, is it fair to expect that you understand the impact of artificial intelligence on your business in 5 or 10 years? I don't think it really is. And yet that's what they're being asked to do. So that's why I wrote the book, to try and empower those people to at least be able to ask the right questions.
One point that I'd like to boomerang back to was that how you mentioned they were all interconnected. And they are. If you look at those 6 that you mentioned, it's all interconnected. AI, IoT, 5G, satellite, blockchain, there are connections amongst all those 6 as soon as you look at them. And that's super important. I think that's, you can't stovepipe it. You have to look at the spectrum, and and leaders have to be aware of the entire 6. So with that, let's go a little bit deeper, shall we, with those 6? Let's talk, the first one, obviously, artificial intelligence, probably the one that people are most accustomed to this day and age. But I'm sure the artificial intelligence that you're talking about in your book isn't what the artificial intelligence we're aware of today. It's not like saying, "Hey Google, whatever." Oh, my phone just piped up. Right? Point proven.
Here's the top search result.
There we go. Point proven, right? But it's not that. So when you're talking artificial intelligence, how do you foresee it? Where are we going? What are those questions that are those problems that it may be able to solve for us down the line?
Yeah, great question. So AI, when I'm talking about AI, I'm really talking about machine learning and deep learning capabilities, and we can get into what's beyond that. But these have been the technologies which have yielded the biggest breakthroughs in the last decade or so, and that's what's given us the ability to talk to our phones. It's what's given us better spam filters, all kinds of capabilities. You may not realize it, but you are using artificial intelligence all day, every day. It's just often there in the background. Your credit scores, your credit card company is using it to try and flag transactions that may not be you, and AI is central to doing that. So artificial intelligence, probably the best way is to just step back, and this will be as technical as I get today. But I think it is worth explaining how it works differently than what I would call traditional computers. So a traditional computer runs programs or apps, and you have inputs, you have outputs, and there are rules embedded in the program that determine how things operate. So when I'm running a word processor, there's a rule embedded in the program that if I hit Control S, it saves my file. That's input, output. If I hit Control B, it turns text bold. So it's a rules-based operation. The way that artificial intelligence works, the way that deep learning, machine learning works, you don't program them in the traditional way. You train them with examples. So you give them inputs and outputs, and from that, over time, given enough examples of inputs and outputs, so this is the output you should give me if I give you this input, it will figure out its own rules. That's why I'm saying that AI lets us solve problems that we don't know how to solve ourselves with traditional computing. So what do I mean by that? So the way that AI operates is using a neural network that is it's great for finding patterns, very complicated patterns. So for example, if I decided to train a type of neural network that is specifically optimized for imaging, we're looking at patterns in images, called convolutional neural network, doesn't matter the name. If I show it enough pictures of cats and dogs, and I label the pictures that are pictures of cats with cats, and I label the pictures with dogs as dogs, so that's my input and output pairs. If I show it enough examples, eventually it will figure out that very complex relationship between an image that includes a cat or an image that includes a dog, so that when I show it an image it's never seen before, that is of an animal, it will tell me what the percentage chance is that that is a cat or a dog. And that's a sort of trivial example, but that's how it works, right? I'm training a neural network by giving it examples. You can use artificial intelligence to find all kinds of relationships between input and output data, between different data types. So if I train an AI with historical data, it will find patterns and be useful for helping me to predict the future. It predicts what's coming next. You can use that to start to create a digital intuition. So, for example, real estate companies are embracing artificial intelligence platforms that will ingest a real estate agent's data, ingest publicly available data. So I'll give you an example. So it might pull in the contacts list from a real estate agent and then go and find all the data about the people on that contact list that's publicly available from a data broker, look through all of that, and then make a prediction about when that person might be in the market to sell their home. And that's, you can predict that based on the age of children or employment status. There may be triggers that lead to, or that they've had a child, and then after a certain amount of time, you need another room in the house. So AI can look at all these intangibles and use those to make predictions about the future. And it's actually incredibly powerful. Real estate agents are able to reach out and start marketing to people just the right time when magically they're in the market to buy a new house. So you can start to think about artificial intelligence as a way to augment our human capabilities and help make us better. There's a category of AI called a GAN, a generative adversarial network. You can read about it in the book. It doesn't matter what the name is. It's a type of AI that actually helps to boost our imaginations, to help to co-create content with us. That technology is embedded into computer-aided design tools from companies like Autodesk. It's called generative design. And it will take a design from a human designer, riff on it, and come up with hundreds or even thousands of different alternatives of that, and help the designer to find an even better version of their design. So you start to get this collaborative process between humans and AIs. So AI is a huge, huge deal. The way I describe it to people is, think about your great, great, great grandparents and what their life was like before electricity. The refrigerator was a block of ice. HVAC was a fan that you held in your hand and fanned yourself with. A washing machine was a mangle and a washboard. Life was tough. And then electricity came, and the modern life was built on top of it. Modern world was built on top of it. We're about to go through the same thing with artificial intelligence. It is that profound of a change, and it will ripple through every business on the planet.
Yeah, it's huge, no doubt. And I basically love everything you had to say there, especially with the looking for patterns bit, which enables leaders and organizations to plan better, plan more efficiently.
Right.
Now,
it's about finding patterns in oceans of data, where there's no way a human mind can find those patterns, but an AI can.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that people get their backs up when you start talking about AI and its ability to take care of all this data for us is all suddenly people start saying, well, that's going to make me obsolete. That's going to, eliminate the positions associated with my team, because we're not going to need as many analysts or whatever within an organization. I always say, well, yes, that's true, but wherever jobs are lost, jobs are also created by new technologies, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? So I'd like to get your take on that as the futurist expert. What should be the key message that leaders are passing on to their team members when they're talking about AI, and when people are getting scared that all suddenly they think they're going to get replaced by a computer?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott, because I'm out on the road all the time, less these days, but before we all had to stay indoors for a bit. I was out on the road in front of audiences all around the world, and the number one questions that would come up from my audiences, whether it was through Q&A or privately, they'd come and talk to me afterwards, was they were sharing their fears about AI. And they really come in two pieces. The first fear is, oh my God, AI is going to kill us all. Right. And part of that is just we've watched too many Hollywood movies. Matrix and The Terminator, both awesome movies. I love them, but they're not reality. And we need to balance that and remember that there's a good chance that somebody listening to this podcast right now, either they or perhaps their children, will have their life saved by a drug that was co-developed with an AI. So it is an incredibly powerful technology, which means in the right hands, it can do incredibly good things. And yes, in the wrong hands, it can do bad things. And we need to mitigate against that. So I say a lot about this in the book, but we should be cautious about AI, but we should not be fearful of it, because it is incredibly powerful and an incredibly powerful force for good if we choose to use it the right way. Second reason people are afraid is because, as you say, people are worried about losing their jobs. It for sure will displace some jobs. I think there's no doubt in my mind about that. And there's been a ton of study done on this. That's the case for nearly all technologies. When the steam train came along, the stagecoaches went away. But the steam train also it created jobs at the station, jobs in the restaurant cars, someone selling tickets, someone who had to make up the timetables, right? There were so many more jobs created by the coming of the steam train than were destroyed. And I think you look at some of the studies that have been done. Price Waterhouse did a study in the UK, the country that I come from. And that's a country of about 66 million people. They estimated that in the next decade or so, artificial intelligence will destroy 7 million jobs, which sounds pretty awful. But at the same time, they estimate that AI will create 7.2 million jobs. So it will create more jobs than it destroys. Now, so the challenge to me is not that we're going to lose jobs. It is that the types of jobs that will be created may not have the same educational requirement as the jobs that are destroyed. So this is not so much an employment challenge as an education challenge. And there's never been a better time to start brushing up on your skills. And we can talk about what those are, but essentially figure out the things that robots can't do and double down on those skills, your human-only skills, to make yourself robot-proof.
No, that's awesome advice to end that portion with, for sure. And that's super interesting, the stats that you're able to get out, projections for the UK of 6 million jobs lost, but 7.2 million created. And that's awesome. And I think that's something that leaders, not even just business leaders or organizational leaders, but political leaders and leaders across the board need to take that message and run with it. Will it affect Scott McCarthy individually? No, I'm not going to come out net positive, but the country, the civilization as a whole will come up net positive, and that's something that is positive. It's just hard for the individuals to see, right, when they're worried about putting food on their own individual table.
Yeah, absolutely, and it just means we need to, make sure that we are relevant and employable in a landscape where artificial intelligence will be taking on some tasks. And we should also remember that AI might do some tasks. It may not be able to do your entire job. And mostly, AI is going to take on the tasks that you don't really want to do. So for most people, the way artificial intelligence will show up in their lives is as an assistant to slough off the crappy work onto, so that we can focus on the stuff we enjoy more. I did a talk last year for the International Society of Barristers, and I gave them an example of an AI that could look for issues in non-disclosure agreements. Looking for things that, you would red line if you were a lawyer and say, no, we won't sign unless that clause is removed. AI can do it 200 times faster and just as well as a human lawyer. And I thought they were going to be quite upset about that. Turns out they were just elated. But guess what? Guess what? No lawyer goes through law school thinking, I can't wait to get to those corporate NDA agreements, right? It's work that they have to do, but really don't enjoy. And so for most of us, that is the way that AI is going to show up in our lives. It's going to elevate human work and make our lives better. Another thought I would share with you, Scott, and for your listeners, is something that came out of the Harvard Business Review. Accenture did a study of 1,500 companies. And one of the conclusions that came out of it, I actually read it to you. I brought it up on my screen so I can share it with you. It says that those that deploy AI mainly to displace employees will see only short-term productivity gains. Firms achieve the most significant performance improvements when humans and machines work together. So that's the strong advice I would give all of your listeners is look to all of these technologies to augment the capabilities of your workers, and elevate them so that they enjoy their work more, so they can do more. I mean, a bit like that real estate agent that's having their intuition augmented, or the designer that's having their creativity augmented. Use technology to augment your human workers, to maintain the humanity in your company, in your brand, and to a lesser degree, look to automation where you're actually trying to replace human workers with machines.
That's awesome. Wow. Sometimes you have goals, but you know what? You have a hard time reaching them, and you just can't figure out why. Why is it that you can't achieve those things that you want to achieve? Maybe it's dedication. Maybe it's motivation. Maybe you haven't picked the right goals. So this is where I was not too long ago. And then I realized something. I've been developing the Power Goals program my entire life, and here it is now for you, where you can learn how to pick the right goals, figure out how to achieve those goals, how to stay on track, but most importantly, how to get back on track when you get off. So are you ready? Are ready to up your game and achieve those things that you've been meaning to achieve for so long now? Simply go to movingforleadership.com/power and learn more about the Power Goals program and achieve everything that you've been wanting to achieve. And now, back to the show. I think we can go all night, but I think that's actually a good dovetail to go into the next one. What I'd like to do so that this doesn't become an 8-hour episode, I am definitely not.
Yeah, let's keep these answers shorter. I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. It's not you, Steve, at all. It's fascinating stuff to me, especially all the different topics that we're talking about here. But I'm no Joe Rogan. I don't push out a 3-hour podcast. What I'd like to do is I'd like to hit sensors and IoT, because I think that is going to be huge for, again, all organizations out there. I'd like to hit blockchain, and I definitely want to finish up with 5G, because those are the ones that I think are there that the leader can grab and really educate themselves a bit better and give them a real taste in their mouth of what you have to offer. So why don't we jump into IoT, sensors and IoT?
Yeah, so essentially sensors let you make the world or your business sort of semi-programmable. So let's think about it both in terms of product innovation, product and service innovation, but also in terms of your infrastructure. So I'm going to use a really simple, trivial example to illustrate how you might use the Internet of Things to optimize your business. So the example I'm going to use is a sprinkler, garden sprinkler, right? Most people, if they have one in their yard, it is built on a timer. It's really stupid. It's very simple. So it comes on a certain time of day, sprinkles on the garden, and then switches itself off. Now, a more intelligent system would use sensors, in this case, a moisture sensor in the ground, so that you could sense, does the soil need to be watered? And if it doesn't, you save the water, right? You don't turn the sprinkler on that time. You could go more sophisticated. That's this example of a hard sensor. You could look at a soft sensor, which might be a connection to the weather report. So if it's going to rain in an hour, and you know that, why would you turn on the sprinkler when water's going to fall out of the sky for free? So you create these control loops using sensors and intelligence. And this is a really simple, trivial example to illustrate it. But as I put the moisture sensor and the weather sensor in there, I can start to make much more intelligent decisions about how I deploy my resources. And it turns out you can do the same at all levels in every business, using sensors to make intelligent decisions or to trigger business events. So what you're sensing is a business event that you need to act upon. Another example I give in the book, I was working with a customer who was looking to make much more responsive service in their restaurants. And they were thinking about putting 3D cameras over the top of tables in the restaurants and bars to look down on the tables and look at the levels in people's glasses, so that you ran no risk of the service attendant, the waitress or waiter, missing the fact that a customer was thirsty and needed another drink, and that would automatically be sensed, and then they'd get a thing come through on their phone or their wearable to say, hey, swing by table 4, Scott's looking thirsty today, needs another beer. If you don't do that, you run the risk of upsetting a customer, so they maybe never come back to the business again, or at a minimum, missing the opportunity to sell another beer, right? So again, creating these loops where you're sensing business events and acting upon them in real time. So building a smart infrastructure that helps you optimize the performance of your business. And I'm trying to give really simple examples there, but you can imagine adding layers of complexity for whatever business you might be in. The second thing to think about is how you might change business models using smart connected devices. So one of the examples I give in the book is from Beam Dental. Their dentist created a smart connected toothbrush. So it's you think, well, that's a stupid idea. Why would I want a smart connected toothbrush? So it connects to your phone, and there are sensors in the toothbrush that are measuring how well you brush your teeth. Now, this smart toothbrush actually tells on you. So it reports back to the dentist to let him know, are you brushing your teeth morning and night? Are you getting to the molars in the back? Are you brushing for a full 2 minutes? I.e., do you have good dental hygiene? Now, why is this important? It's because this dentist doesn't just sell you dental services or a toothbrush. In fact, that toothbrush comes to you for free along with all the toothpaste and floss you can use as part of an entire dental hygiene service that he offers. And that includes dental insurance. Now, he's able to do that for 15 to 20% less than his competitors because he knows he's measuring the risk of you needing expensive dental procedures. Because if you brush your teeth properly, you need less crowns and root canals and expensive medical procedures that would hit him on insurance. So he completely changed the business model and took a product, in this case a smart toothbrush, and turned it into an entire dental service and I would argue an experience. It's a completely new way of thinking about things. So what smart connected devices could you build in your business that would enable you to move from selling products to services to experiences to transformations? Because at each level, as you go up there, you can charge more money and make more margin.
That toothbrush is fantastic. Like,
isn't it cool? Yeah. I mean,
not the, well, yeah, obviously the physical toothbrush, but the ideology behind it, because it's more than, him being able to sell a service at a reduced rate. It's even a psychological factor of the, say I had it. I am now thinking I have my dentist looking over my shoulder every time I brush my teeth.
Psychologically, yeah, that changes.
Right? Psychologically, because I know that data is being captured. I know that data is being shipped out. Now, it obviously doesn't work on 100% of people, but it definitely would work on a fair number of people. So not only is he reducing the risk and he's getting, more information and stuff like this, but psychologically, he's pushing his clientele to do what they should be doing so that they're going to show up to his place less often, but he's still capturing the insurance premiums that they're paying in. So it's kind of like, it's kind of almost modeling sort of like auto in that you want them to pay, but you hope they don't use.
Right, and what the Internet of Things does, because it's using sensors and connectivity and cheap computing, it allows you to ask the question, what business am I really in?
Right.
Right, and what? How could that be different? How do I get paid for results? In this case, the dentist is being paid for the good dental health of his patients. And he's not selling a toothbrush. He's not selling procedures, right? It's a different way of thinking about it. So it gets you to, as a leader, to get into a fundamental question space of asking, who are we as a business? What do we stand for? What's our purpose? And what are other ways that we could get paid for that?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I'm just going to do a quick little short plug for people to, think about security about this stuff because, the data is going out there. Look at BlackBerry. BlackBerry is a great secure of Internet of Things. I am a shareholder of BlackBerry, hence why I'm throwing this little promotional plug in. Moving on. Talking about shares and money, let's talk quickly about blockchain. What is it? It seems, especially for a guy like myself who has an MBA, who follows finances, it seems very convoluted. It's like hard to grasp the concept of what is blockchain. So what is it? Why is it important? And then why did you say it's been overinflated?
I think so. Good question. So blockchain is incredibly complex. And it's a bit like, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? But I've been studying it for years, and there's some parts of it I still don't quite get. But let me sort of explain it in the easiest way possible, which I found is the easiest way for most people to grasp what it is. At its simplest level, blockchains are just fancy databases, right? It's a place to store information. It happens to be how is it fancy? It's distributed, which means the information is stored on many people's different computers. It is stored in a way that is almost impossible to change. I would say impossible to change. So it's immutable. So once information goes into that database, it can't be changed. And so it is a way of creating trust digitally. So another key factor about blockchains is that they have this, many of them have this capability called smart contracts, which is a way of building contracts in terms of a program, is the way to think about it. So a classic contract is written on paper and enforced by the law. A smart contract is written on a blockchain and enforced by code. So it enables you to start to conduct business in new ways and to start to improve the efficiency of that business and remove intermediaries from business. So I'll give you an example. In the loan origination business, there are many different people with many, getting their hands on your loan as it goes from application to you getting funds in the bank, right? It's a very complex process, and there are lots of things that person A has to do before person B can do their work. So an underwriter has to say yes before the funding can go. The person getting the loan has to get an insurance policy on a property before the loan can go. So you can start to build those if-then statements into a blockchain and speed up the business process by making it easier to coordinate between all those parties. You can also think about blockchains as a way to remove intermediaries. So if you think about the way that most business is done, it's often done between strangers. So think about when you buy stock, for example. You don't know who, if you buy 100 shares on E-Trade, you don't know who you're buying them from, right? You never meet that person. You don't know for sure they have those shares. And so you have an intermediary, in this case, E-Trade or a clearinghouse, that is making sure that, yep, you've got the money to pay for those shares and the person you're buying from them has the legal right to those shares, and it's therefore safe to exchange value. Blockchains can fulfill a lot of that capability using their smart contracts capability. So blockchains have lots of implications. They are powerful for decentralizing markets. They can be used to tokenize assets. So essentially turning a physical asset into digital shares, which are called tokens. That enables you to have part ownership in assets. And those assets could be physical assets like real estate. So the blockchains are being used to sell investments into large pieces of commercial real estate. So you could invest $1,000 into a big office building or a shopping mall using blockchains to handle all of that those contracts. They're also being used to enable the buying and selling of intangible assets like patents, and other art, things like that. So it's a big chapter in the book, and I'm trying to make sure I cover as much as I can in the time we have here. But it's a powerful technology. And now to answer your question about why did I say it was overblown for a long time? Blockchain technology was the technology that underpinned cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Those were blockchain 1.0. Blockchain 2.0 is where we got smart contracts sort of 5 or 6 years ago. Those blockchains were still kind of clunky. They used too much energy to operate, and they were too slow. So now we're into sort of third generation blockchains that are optimized for fast transaction speeds, low energy consumption relative to blockchain 2, blockchain 1. And they're finally hitting their stride. And I think we're going to start to see those take off. So the same way that we had to wait for HTML5 and HTML6 until we could have amazing applications like Zoom running on the web, we had to wait until blockchains hit their stride and we got third generation blockchains before it became a really useful, powerful tool that would scale to solve real business problems.
Wow, yeah, this could definitely be a whole podcast episode and probably then some.
Yeah,
I don't
it's a
even know
monstrous
where.
topic.
Yeah, it it's yeah, it's definitely going to be complex. I don't even think we've even touched the surface of it yet, and it's definitely going to be more so for those large organizations out there if people are in
Partic-
them.
yeah, and particularly for companies that have supply chains where they need
Right.
to monitor and add transparency and traceability to supply chains. Blockchain is an incredibly powerful tool for that too.
Yeah, I should definitely look into this. Being a logistics officer and all, being in charge of a supply chain for the Canadian Army. Well, not in charge of it, but that's what I do. Uh, so
Well, and I think companies are going to get the expectation from consumers is going to shift as you go through tough times like COVID-19, and people feel sort of a lack of control in their lives. They're going to, when this is all over, try and reassert that control by asking more questions of brands, including things like, where did that product come from? How much
mhm.
energy was used to make it? Were any nasty chemicals used to make it? Is this food safe to eat? Where did it come from? How is it grown? And blockchains are going to be vital to underpin the supply chain technologies needed to track and trace that, and not only make those claims to consumers, but to be able to prove them as well.
Yeah, the whole social responsibility aspect, right? It's becoming more and
Mm-hmm.
more vital for sure. Steven, super interesting stuff. What I'd like to do is, hammer into 5G networks. So 5G is definitely it's here. It's being deployed. It's obviously not full scale yet, but you see little bits of it across the planet. There's a lot of talk of it, in my country, in your country, in your homeland as well, predominantly on the security side of it. But I'd like to skip that for now and talk about what is it actually going to bring. You give us a little
Yeah.
preview of it, as you mentioned that it's the first cellular network where it's been built from the ground up with not just phones in mind. Now, Scott McCarthy's vision of the future with cell networks is that eventually one day I will no longer have a pipeline into my house, but instead I'm going to have my cell network, my cell box or something that will run the Wi-Fi of my house, but that is actually fully geared via the cell network, and everything will be through that, essentially through cellular. Now, could that be 10 years away, 30 years away? Who knows? Or maybe that'll never happen. But
Yeah.
that's my envision of the future. Obviously, that's not a 5G thing. That might be an 8 or 10G thing. But you mentioned it's not like 3 to 4 and then 4 to LTE. What is 5G going to bring us? Why is it important to the leaders out there?
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not going to be able to just do more on their smartphone faster. What is it going to bring to them?
Yeah. So, as we've gone from 3G to 4G, 4G to 5G, each time they get faster, right? So download speeds and to some extent upload speeds have increased. And this time is no different. We'll get 10 to 100 times faster downloads. So great. I can download movies quicker or whatever. Nice to have, but really it's the other characteristics of 5G that are interesting from an industrial perspective, from a business perspective. So what are those characteristics? First one is latency. What that means is not only that when I request data, it comes down much more quickly, but that it starts coming much more quickly. So the time from when I request information to when it starts coming back is much shorter. That's known as latency. And that is going to get cut dramatically with 5G. What that does is it has the effect of making it feel like the internet is closer to you, because it's going to be much more responsive. And that enables a whole new set of applications to be built on top of it, because you can rely on that responsiveness. So one example would be streaming virtual and augmented reality. At the moment, your headset is connected to a fast computer because it needs that local computing power to give you the speed of response so that as you turn your head, you don't feel sick because it's too slow to catch up. Once we get to 5G, the latency of the network is such that you could start to build streaming virtual reality, streaming augmented reality headsets that are using computing in the cloud to be able to generate those images and still give you the responsiveness that you need. Similarly, you could start to think about building, give you an example that I put in the book, an autonomous drone. So at the moment, to build an autonomous drone that can sense the world and safely navigate its way through it, you have to put a lot of computing power onto the drone so that it can make decisions quickly enough to be safe. With 5G, you could start to imagine offloading a lot of that computing to the cloud, which means you have a much cheaper, lighter weight, and therefore longer battery life drone, because you don't have to have all that onboard computing power. So it enables you to start to distribute computing and design things in a different way, which are much more cost effective. Other important capabilities of 5G, it's designed to be much more reliable. So you're going to get a lot less dropped calls and connections, but when you're relying on a data connection in a business critical connection, that's going to have much greater uptime than 4G. And it's going to scale much better. So if you think about what it's like when you if you visit Silicon Valley, there's so many people on the cellular connection there that even though there are cell towers everywhere, it's still slower than it is in my hometown here in Portland, Oregon. So it's going to be much more scalable in dense metro areas. And overall, you're going to get a much better experience. So 5G is actually not one network. It's actually 3 networks that are connected together and logically hidden. So it feels to us like one network, but it's actually 3 that are working together. And there's this notion of network slices where you take different pieces of those 3 networks and put them together to do the job that you need. So, for example, and to do it in a secure way. So if you were a sports stadium, you might make a contract with AT&T to get a network slice which allows you to have high quality streaming video inside the stadium only, so that they can create these amazing in-stadium experiences that don't work when you walk outside the stadium, but they only pay for that bandwidth during games. If you are a police department, maybe you want to have a network connection that gives you video for your squad cars 24/7. If you are a hospital, maybe you want to have connected ambulances that allow you to stream imaging data in a HIPAA-protected, secure way back to the hospital when you're bringing a patient in that needs immediate attention. So it's highly configurable. It's far more reliable, far more scalable, and designed specifically with the Internet of Things in mind.
With the time we're in right now, the middle of the COVID-19 crisis at the time of this recording, I can foresee the push for 5G so much faster, so much harder as the fallout from this pandemic hits the world, and people pushing to go working from home more often, organizations looking to downsize or get more efficient. 5G, the need, not necessarily the need, but the demand will be there and definitely will get pushed harder. And doctors, for example, talk of 5G in doctors' offices and being able to work from home more with basically all the tools that they would have, or all the information that they would have at their fingertips at a hospital, but from their own personal desk, is going to be huge. So 5G, I think, definitely has some serious potential, ground-changing potential to it, for sure.
Well, I think all of the technologies do, especially when put together. I think of COVID-19 as the great accelerator. It's going to accelerate many things that were going to happen anyway. And you mentioned telemedicine, online education, home grocery deliveries. Those things were always going to continue to increase, but COVID-19 has made them happen very quickly. I think we're also going to see automation efforts increase dramatically, because guess what? Robots don't get sick, and autonomous vehicles don't carry diseases. So automation, digitization of businesses is going to accelerate because of the pandemic. And I would argue the other reason, I don't believe that businesses save or cut their way out of recession. We are going into a pretty serious global recession. The only way for businesses to get themselves out of recession is to invest and innovate their way out of it. How do you innovate? Well, there's a book I just wrote about that topic. Look at these 6 technologies, find ways to combine them in interesting ways to create new channels to customers. We may be in a sort of hunkered down posture now for 12 to 18 months. That's going to mean that businesses are forced to innovate. And it turns out we have 6 technologies, almost like 6 colors in the palette that we can combine in interesting ways to completely rethink our businesses. So it's not a bad time to be thinking about how you're going to innovate your way through and out of this.
Steve, man, you couldn't have wrapped this talk up any better. We haven't even hit all 6. We skipped over autonomous machines and virtual, augmented, and mixed realities. And I'm sure one other. But anyway, no, say there's a lot of great information in the head of yours, but more importantly, it's been put to paper and put into the book. So thanks for writing it. Again, thanks for coming out and sharing this knowledge with the audience member listening. Before we wind down, I got a couple last questions for you. And one being a question I ask all my guests here at Moving Forward Leadership, and it is to you, Steve Brown. What makes a great leader?
To me, a great leader is a great listener, a great communicator, and a great inspirer of others. I love Simon Sinek's definition of a leader. A leader only needs one thing: followers. And the best way to get people to follow you is to be straight with them, to inspire them, to listen to them, to nurture them, and to show them why the promised land you're taking them to is better than where they are today. That's what I always think makes great leaders.
Awesome, man. Love it. And finally, how can people find you? Where can they grab the book? Where can they follow you on your journey? Feel free to give yourself a shameless plug. It's all about you.
Sure. So you can find me at baldfuturist.com. So BALD futurist.com, on Twitter at baldfuturist, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Bald Futurist. Once you've got that, you can find me. The book is at all good bookstores. So you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Powell's, and it's called The Innovation Ultimatum. And I wrote it for you. So I hope you will get value from it. I hope you will use it to empower yourself, and I hope you will use it to empower your employees and inspire them to build a better future. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today, Scott. I really enjoyed it.
No, it was awesome. Thanks again for coming down. It's been a great show. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the book, what I've been able to get through so far. Unfortunately, not too much, as I still am winding down on my master's program. But again, most importantly, thanks for taking time and coming out.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice talking to you.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember R squared, S squared, right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R squared, rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.